Excited to go to the Stanley Fencing and Gates hotline to welcome to the show. Swain, do we introduce him as former college football writer Andy Staples? He has the Andy Staples Show now on 3.
We introduce him as multimedia superstar.
That's it.
Andy Staples, now of On3.com. Andy, good afternoon, sir.
I like Swain's intro better. I'll take that one. I will. That's the best one I think I've ever gotten.
My man. Andy, you had media days. What stood out the most to you? Was it maybe a player representing himself in the school, maybe something that a coach said, a storyline? What stood out to you the most last week at SEC Media Days?
The thing that stood out to me the most was the Alabama folks not having to manufacture a chip on their shoulder. Like, they felt legitimately disrespected, and I realized they wound up getting picked to win the West, but it was not by much. And they're like, no one is picking them to win the whole SEC. Everybody's on Georgia right now. And I think it's interesting to see Nick Saban in a situation where he feels like he's got a problem he has to solve, because I do feel like that makes him even better than normal. Like, when they come off a national title, it feels like he's struggling to find ways to motivate them. Now, he doesn't need to find anything. And that's a very deep roster. They got to figure out the quarterback situation, but I got a feeling they're going to have a say in all this.
The conversation of Tennessee's quarterback, Joe Milton, has been so polarizing, because you have a lot of people that they see his arm strength, they see his physical talents, but they're not yet convinced that he's going to have a big season based on what happened in Michigan, based on what happened a couple of years ago when he was a starter and was replaced by Hendon Hooker. You seem to be very high on Joe Milton. Why is that?
Blind faith, I think. Really, the Orange Bowl is what did it for me. And don't ask me to go look at the Vanderbilt game from the week before, but that's against a good Clemson defense in the Orange Bowl that was almost at full strength. And he was making throws that you'd wanted to see him make the entire time, that just hadn't come. And if he can do that in that offense, I mean, it's pretty spectacular what he can achieve. And he'll, of course, shoot up draft boards and everything. Now, we did a QB draft on my show last night, and I might have gotten a little excited and taken Joe a little too high. I think I took him in the second round. I probably could have gotten him a little lower than that. But I said when I took him, I'm like, all right, Vol fans, I don't want you screaming for Nico the first time he overthrows somebody. Like, give the man a chance. Let's get him going. But I do understand the reservations that people have, because historically people don't become more accurate. But we have seen it on occasion, and this is a deal where this is a guy's fifth year in college. You know, interesting situation, because he goes to Tennessee. He was the guy that staff brought in as a transfer. He was their hand-picked guy. He's the starter. He doesn't, gets beat out eventually by Hendon Hooker. But instead of just saying, oh, I'm going to, get my degree and move on, he stays and works with Hendon Hooker and just says, you know what, my time is going to come in this offense and I could be good in it. And I thought against a really good Clemson defense, we saw that. So I'm hopeful that that's what we're going to see from Joe Milton throughout the year. Because if that's the case, you're talking about first-round draft pick.
We're talking to Andy Staples from On3.com. If Joe is able to accomplish close to what he's capable of, what does that mean for Tennessee? Because Tennessee made it clear while it was there on Thursday at Media Days, the goal is to win the East, which means trying to beat out Georgia, which is everybody's favorite.
Yeah, and now Tennessee's got to worry about a lot before they get to Georgia. And, I think with Tennessee, I want to see how well they reload on the lines of scrimmage. When you lose a first-round offensive tackle like Darnell Wright, that's not an easy thing to replace. So what does that offensive line look like? What does the defensive line look like? I think we kind of know what they are at the skill positions, and we know that offense, the scheme itself, is going to make them very tough to stop for most defenses. The part that worries you is, like, how do you beat Georgia? Because Georgia seemed to have a very good game plan and the personnel to pull it off. against that offense, because what they did is they just kept everything in front of them, and they said, fine, we'll let you gain 7-8 yards on a throw. We're not going to let you gain 50. And the other teams they played either didn't or couldn't, and the answer usually is probably couldn't do that against Tennessee. So there aren't a lot of defenses that are going to be able to do that against Tennessee. Even Alabama couldn't do it last year. Like Alabama, we'll see what happens, because I think their secondary is actually going to get a little faster this year. They may do some different things to defend Tennessee than we saw last year. You wouldn't have a situation, I think, again, where a Jalen Hyatt is getting a free run at DeMarco Hellams 20 yards down the field. Like, that's probably not going to happen again. But I think most teams that Tennessee will play don't have the athletes to pull that off. And that's why I think that offense is still going to be very productive.
Andy Staples on 3 with us. I think the beginning of the week, it's a long week. It's a 4-day event. The beginning of the week seemed to have the Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher, Bobby Petrino conversation kind of kick things off. What did you make of that? What do you make of Texas A&M heading into this season, trying to fix that offense?
Well, Texas A&M has, in terms of just their starting 22, if you had them come off the bus and then had Georgia's come off the bus, you'd be like, what's the difference? They've got dudes. They have the body types that you're looking for to be competitive at the top of the SEC, but they just have never been able to put it all together. They don't beat the teams they're supposed to beat. They actually do seem to get up for the better teams on their schedule, which, if I were Tennessee, would make me very concerned about that Texas A&M game. The Bobby Petrino thing is interesting to me because he, say what you will about the guy, he's always been a very good play caller, and I think he might be one of the few people who Jimbo Fisher could have hired in that role, who is going to tell Jimbo Fisher to stuff it if Jimbo starts to try to take the play calling back or horn in. So, he's not like a younger coordinator who's going to just defer to Jimbo at all times. He is going to have a very strong opinion. That could be good or that could be a disaster. I have no idea, but I am excited to see it play out.
Andy Staples on 3.com. It seems like there were a few teams talked about last week. It was Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee. For the most part, what team outside of those four are you the most confident in that, even though last week they were kind of slept on, that postseason we'll be talking about the most because they're going to have a good season this year?
I'm not confident in anybody below those four. Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee feel like the ones we know the most about.
Yeah.
But everybody else is kind of clumped together. Now, if I were to predict which team would be considerably better than they were last season, I think Kentucky is a pretty safe bet. They bring Liam Cohen back as the OC. I think Devin Leary is an excellent choice out of the transfer portal at quarterback. This is a guy that NC State was mounting a Heisman campaign for this time last year before he got hurt. He has NFL tools, and they've got pretty good skill position players like Barry and Brown, really good young guy. They have some young guys on their defense that excite you, and Brad White's one of the more creative defensive coordinators in the league. So I think they're going to be better than they were last year. Everybody else, it's very hard to predict. Like the five in the SEC West below Alabama and LSU, I said what I said about Texas A&M, but again, until they prove they can beat Auburn or Mississippi State or Ole Miss when they're supposed to beat them, I'm not ready to believe. So I look at like that group of five of Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, and Arkansas. When they play each other, that feels like toss-up games to me.
You live in Gainesville. What's the temperature in Gainesville? What's the tone entering Billy Napier's second season?
Lukewarm. The temperature is very lukewarm, despite it being incredibly hot, and the heat index is like 108 today. But no, this is the least excited I've seen Florida fans in a while. But it's interesting because you talk to Billy Napier, you talk to people around the program, they actually are feeling okay. And they're feeling okay only because I think the fan base is not expecting any miracles. They're not expecting an SEC East title or anything like that. But this team, I think, will be better than the Vegas prediction, the 5.5 win total. I don't know how much better. I am thinking like 7-5 type better. But it's really comes down to how well they've reshaped the roster. They didn't come in and flip the thing right away, which you saw USC do that with Lincoln Riley when he got there. You've seen other programs. LSU had to do it when Brian Kelly got there. Like Arizona State this year looks like they're doing almost what Colorado did, but not quite with as much fanfare. They're not just blatantly cutting people. But Napier made a conscious choice not to really flip the roster last year, and I think that was a mistake. And I think he realizes that was a mistake. And if you looked at the exodus from Florida, for the most part, at the end of the season, it was guys signed in the later era of the Dan Mullen era who probably weren't going to play going forward. They did lose some people they wanted to keep, like Michael Tarquin, who was their starting left tackle last year. He's going to start at USC this year. But I think they feel good about who they have, who they got out of the portal. Two names to remember, Cam Jackson and Caleb Banks. Cam Jackson came from Memphis. Banks came from Louisville. They probably are that's probably the interior of that D-line this year, and I think they feel better about that. Even though they lost Jervon Dexter, it always felt like Jervon was out there by himself. And I think this year they're going to feel a little more complete on the defensive line, and I think they like secondary. We'll see about the offensive line. The backs are going to be good. Now, you're replacing a first-round draft pick, Anthony Richardson, a quarterback, who I don't think they got the most out of, because I think they were terrified to run him because they didn't know what they had behind them. Mm-hmm. And now you go to Graham Mertz, the Wisconsin transfer. I don't think they're going to be too terrified to do anything with him. I don't, they'll play the guys behind him if they have to. But I think a lot of their offense is going to try to start with the run game with Montreal Johnson and Trevor Etienne, and then hope play action opens up some of the receivers, because their receiving core beyond Ricky Pearsall is a big unknown. They got some young guys coming in. If they happen to be good, that makes a huge difference. But Florida hasn't had real dynamic receivers in a long time.
And it's been a long time since Tennessee won at Florida, 20 years. That was Jason Swain's freshman season at Tennessee.
Yeah.
Week 3, Tennessee goes there. What should Tennessee fans think about that game? Because the sense is that the expectation is the Vols go down there and maybe even roll against Florida.
Well, they should be expecting a win, and if they don't get a win, then they need to worry. Then they need to worry about, maybe there's some regression going on here. And, that's the thing. The expectations on this team at Tennessee this year are very high. And I thought they were too high going into last season, and then they surpassed them. And I still worry, though, that a lot of that was Hendon Hooker lightning in a bottle. So we'll see. I mean, if Joe Milton's as good as I think he's going to be, I think they'll be fine. But if they go into Gainesville and lose, then that also opens up the possibility of losing to South Carolina again, of Kentucky being able to beat them, Texas A&M being able to beat them, and that's where the margin is in the SEC. Like you have to be that good to be a double-digit win team year in, year out, and so I think that'll be a good litmus test for both of those teams, because for Florida, winning that game would bring a lot of optimism. Now, I don't know that it necessarily means they're going to be a 10-win team. They could still be 7-5 if they win that game, but it would change the tenor and tone around the program. It's going to be big. I mean, they're going to get Florida's absolute best shot in that game.
Andy Staples, you're with On3.com now. Tell people about what you're putting together with your new show, how they can find it.
You can find it on the On3 YouTube channel. We premiere at 8 p.m. Eastern Time every single night. We're going live a lot of nights. We went live last night. We're going to go live again tonight. And then also, if you don't want to watch, if you just want to listen, then we're available on every podcast platform. As soon as the show's done, it gets uploaded to the podcast platform. So you can watch either live or on demand on YouTube, or if you want, just grab it on as a podcast and walk your dog and listen.
Andy Staples, multimedia superstar.
I'm putting that on business cards.
Please.
Yep. Andy, have them build the graphic as well. Go check it out. Go subscribe at the On3 YouTube channel or wherever you listen as well. Andy, great to have you on the show. Thanks for the time and all the insight today.
Thank you, guys.
Andy Staples covering college football now with On3. Good stuff there. We'll